ultimately, you're either the Mercedes on the inside lane of a motorway, or, as we like to be, remember when you had your first car? Mine was a Mini, and I used to get as many mates in that as I possibly could, go from Burcote to Hemel Hempstead to Visage, in the outside lane, as fast as this stupid little thing would go, which is about 40 miles an hour. We're going this way, we understand our objective, and we're all going to do that together. So we want the guys that will pile into the Mini, and come on, let's go this way.
Hi and welcome to Thrivalism. I'm Toby, Head of Marketing Interaction, and I'm here today with Mark and Ian from Xledger. Hello guys, welcome to Thrivalism.
Thank you very much.
Good. Right, so we start then briefly, I guess. It would be useful to get an overview of Xledger before we get into all the stuff I want to talk about, which is culture, people, how you've built the best place to work. Do you want to give us a brief overview of Xledger and your roles there and a bit of background?
You can do that.
I like it. Oh. Okay. So Xledger UK. I'll get a bit closer. We're obviously part of the Xledger group. There are four key countries in that: Norway, Sweden, USA, and ourselves,
and Finland.
And
don't forget the Finnish.
The new Finnish guys that have joined just recently. So we're expanding at a rapid rate. I joined the business just over 2 years ago. I think a month after Mark. Business at that point was really in a stage of startup. We needed to take that business from startup to scale up. Both of us have previously run businesses, so we wanted to bring our experience into the business, what's good, what's not so good, what mistakes we've made, and grow the business forward from there.
Great. We'll come on to those mistakes. That'll be fun.
Weirdly, we've made them all over again. I don't know.
I think we've tried to avoid them. It'd be interesting to go through that.
Great. What?
So same story. So with the who is Xledger? We have a vision of growth to become, to coin a phrase of our illustrious leader, Yala Sky, the dominant mid-market financial management tool. In order to do that, you need to be of a certain size to fund fairly hefty R&D. So we took the business over in 2019. And have quite aggressive but managed growth plans between now and 2025. We called it, in our genius, the road to $1 billion. That is Norwegian kroner, not GBP.
£6.70 roughly?
About that. So about £120 million, something like that, over that 5 years. Now, we could probably grow faster, but this is our legacy business. This is the one that is the one we want to stay in, our kids to work in, and to really continue. So very much a focus on managed growth, not a army of salespeople, which is fairly easy to do, creating a nice healthy wake of chaos behind them and then tidy up. We're doing this with a focus on the customer service, the quality, retaining those customers for 7 to 10 years is our average. So super important to focus on the right people, building the right culture to facilitate that, which is the mission we're on between now and 2025.
Perfect.
Like it's a long way away.
Framing. Thank you. So talking of people and culture, you've won loads of awards recently.
All of them, I think.
All of the awards. Oscars, all of them. Best place to work, Employer of the Year, Best Workplace for Wellbeing, Bristol Live, Best Place to Work, Tech, Best Place to Work as well, I think.
Best place for women to work as well.
Really? Best place for women to work? Obviously, that isn't a fluke or a coincidence. You must have had some very deliberate thoughts into how to create your culture and how to keep it going. But when you come in here and you walk around and talk to people, it doesn't feel forced, or it doesn't feel cult-like, or it doesn't feel inauthentic. So what are some of the things you've put in place? What were the first steps you took when you started thinking about your culture?
Ironically, it was a fluke.
I think that's where the mistakes come in, if I'm honest, because you take that, you remember the mistakes that you made and ensure that the culture you need to build. You need people to want to build the business for you. You've got to empower the people. And I think you can't do that if you don't build the right culture. You want them to come into the office. You want them to naturally lead, and you've got to allow them to do that. And there's many different ways you can do that, but as you grow, it's very difficult. You end avoiding these layers of management that are just there, as we say, to piss in the corners, and actually trying to get to the next level. They actually need to do, actually deliver and make the business work.
So what are some of those? You mentioned some mistakes you've made in terms of culture building previously. What might some of those have been?
It's an interesting word. So you mentioned it wasn't a fluke, but it probably was originally. We had When we first took it over, both Ian and I, we knew each other previously, and we come from a rugby background. So there is a certain type, a rugger bugger as they call them, but there's very much focus on ethics, cultural compass, things of that nature. It all sounds very airy-fairy. So we didn't really know how to translate that this time. We knew what we weren't going to do, didn't we? And that premised on the mistake.
And is that when you say you knew what you weren't going to do, that's creating like a homogenous, like...
What we weren't going to do was more around we get told off for this, but we kind of have a no dick rule. Which makes it sound like we don't employ men, women, but it's not. That's not the case. It means, we used to very basic analogies, but we used to get invited out for dinners with your own sort of staff. My previous business had 4,000 people in it, and the admins that were looking after that process were very focused on who do you not want to sit next to, and there was a long list. The design for this one was, don't care. We have to recruit people that we really want to spend time with, that are thoroughly committed through being themselves to our mission and our design and what we wanted to do. We also then benchmarked that. So you mentioned the awards. That was, winning those was actually a byproduct of a process. So we knew what we thought good looks like, but why not go out to these sorts of organizations who are impartial and have what we deemed as the best practice way of measuring and awarding companies that adhere and conform to those sorts of guidelines. So the first time we did it was purely to understand the guidelines. Where are our strengths? Where are our weaknesses? What have we got? And what are we going to improve on? And then came second in the whole country. So we figured that was like a honeymoon period because everyone was new and shiny and untainted. But that became the premise of saying, okay, these are the core areas. Things like mental well-being was super high through COVID and so on. So we built these pillars around which we would measure ourselves, and that fed back into recruitment. So the way we've done it is more we're going to fill this full of anecdotes, by the way, is put that fence at the top of the cliff rather than an ambulance at the bottom, isn't it? Instead of just hiring based on capability alone and willingness and availability to do the job, we were very focused on 70% of that decision being cultural fit. And the interview process is quite interesting to get to the real person, not the interview 101 formal version. It's
so what
quite
some
obscure.
Things you do in the interview?
We had a cracking one actually where we did some, it sounds a bit stalkerish, but we tend to find out a few interesting things, don't we, working in conjunction with our partners in recruitment. And we had one lady that came, and I tend not to ask too many questions. If they're in our panel interview at the end, somebody else smarter than Ian and I has figured out they can do the job. It's for us to judge if they're going to fit in and augment the culture, not just upset it. And we had found a video from years ago where she had won Deal or No Deal. And the last thing where you've got these two boxes, haven't you? And there's £250,000 in one and £5 in the other or something. So they made an offer of like £60,000. And our question was, how did you explain the bravery that it took to make that decision to risk such a huge amount of money? Yeah, £60,000. I think she was 21 years old at the time of sort of being a contestant. And the complete conversation changed. And what we try and do in all of those interviews is find something that somebody talks passionately about. If they don't change from all the formality of an interview to when they're talking about their kids or passions of cycling or whatever it might be, then they're not so much for us. We want to see that real individual because that's the person you're hiring. That's what you're going to get on an ongoing basis. Everyone behaves themselves through probation periods and all the rest of it. We need people to genuinely get on board, understand our vision, share our passion, because we don't bark orders here. Everyone is autonomous. Everyone knows what they've got to do. Our job is to provide an environment and a leadership that's decisive, but open and transparent. And we're quite good at talking about our mistakes, aren't we?
We are, and I think that's really important. That recruitment process from day one for us is what's helped drive that culture. We are involved in every single interview, and whether they're anywhere in our department or wherever, to look at that person as an individual. We also invite other people into those interviews who are there to meet and greet. Do they fit in the team? Will they disrupt the team? It's not just about capability, and we also make sure there's always females in the interview process. So we get two aspects. They see a very different person to the male. It's fact.
And if you go into those interviews and you're in there and there's someone else from the team in there and they disagree with you on your verdict on the person, who gets the final say on that?
It's a hell yes or it's a no.
And that's got to be a communal hell yes.
Correct.
So
absolutely.
No debate.
Now that's awkward, isn't it? Because there might be something we've not seen. So sometimes that manifests itself with let's understand why. What were the reservations? If it's cultural, it's just a straight no. But the beauty of that is we've recruited all similar personalities and very diverse backgrounds and different experiences, but they have the same shared beliefs. An ethical structure and so on. So that's not often something, they don't get to that point. The first 2 interviews are about culture, and then there's a capability type one, and then it's final panel. So normally specifics around non-responsive questions, whatever it might be. So we'll propose a follow-up call if some people are on the fence about it. Yeah. But at the end of that process, if it's not right, it's not right.
I don't think anyone, no one carries any more weight than the others. Everyone, will argue either way or discuss either way.
Duty, basically.
Yeah, that's right. That sounds quite dramatic, of course.
Yeah. I think that's the key thing. Again, goes back to what I said. It's empowering the business. You're empowering the people to make decisions. They feel they're part of the recruitment process as well, and that's really key because they are the ones they are the custodians of the culture. It's not just the 2 of us.
Yeah, you're doing very well, by the way, with your cliche bingo. I've signed off about 5 already.
Excellent. Well, we've got a competition. Who can do the most?
We'll drop in the sound effects. Every time there's a cliche, we'll do a little bing after.
Excellent.
So it sounds like you've managed to create, I'm going to get a sound effect myself now, but a real, I can't say it, a real alignment between your organisational culture and your sort of vision for the business, and those 2 things mesh really well. That's quite difficult to do, and not many companies manage that. So although you've covered it a bit, how do you approach sort of getting everyone on board with the shared vision for the company, but also having their autonomy and their freedom and the ability to manage their own day?
So two key things. One is the style with which we do that. So I'm going to tell another story, but what we use as another sort of anecdote for how we describe this is there are businesses in our position, software companies, you get lots of VC money in, not that we've used our own, which makes us a little bit more frugal, but ultimately you're either the Mercedes on the inside lane of a motorway, or as we like to be, remember when you had your first car, mine was a Mini, and I used to get as many mates in that as I possibly could, go from Burco to Hemel Hempstead to Visage, in the outside lane as fast as this stupid little thing would go, which is about 40 miles an hour. We're going this way, we understand our objective, and we're all going to do that together. So we want the guys that will pile into the Mini and come on, let's go this way. What happens in reality is you have to have a level of transparency to that. So we have a thorough process twice a year that starts at global level. So we sit on the global board, we look at the objectives of the business. They tend to be monetary. You're looking at what are the KPIs and the targets by which we measure our spend. An ROI, so pretty fundamental. We then build in, and I build out a UK version. What are the UK going to achieve this year or this half year? We then work with every manager and then every employee. So by the end of that process, every employee has a set of objectives that they can see exactly how that fits into their teams, their departments, the UK and globally, those objectives. We don't actually give them any monetary targets. Obviously, we do the sales guys. Yeah. They're simpler souls. They need that sort of monetary, and it's attached to a commission program, so you need that there. But for everybody else, including them, to be fair, there's far more of a, if we do these things, if you select great customers, if you do fantastic marketing, if you're authentic with your corporate social responsibility, if you treat your people well, if we hire effectively, if we don't set crazy utilization targets for consultants, ours is 60%, not 110. If you do all of those things and provide an environment where people are happy, they feel safe, it provides balance to work life, the byproduct is you grow the business and the revenue comes from that activity first. We're quite good at sticking with that and the prioritizing our ethical standpoint of treating people really, really well. All the other stuff tends to happen.
So that's really interesting because when you talked about those targets layering down through the business and then layering out to the global one, I thought they would all be revenue-based and target-based, but in fact, they end up in very different areas about
completely
ethics and social and culture.
Very much so.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. That's good to hear that much. And one thing we haven't mentioned is sort of values and those sort of things, which often come up in chats like this. Have you got company values?
Oh, yes, we do.
How does it work?
They're written on the wall somewhere. I think it's a really good question because we spent a long time sort of defining them as companies do and trying to steer away from what's the output of that. People tend to do that from a perspective of winning business or communicating an identity outwardly. We started with who are we and what should we do in everyday life as opposed to just in work. And then you marry those values to actual character traits. So for example, amaze is one of those. Don't be boring. Don't be mediocre. Go and do something amazing. It sounds corny, but it's pretty easy then to go, that's not overly amazing that. We've got do good, which we live and breathe. You know, we do a huge amount with charity, which we all thoroughly enjoy. And we tend to pick things in arenas such as sport, a lot to do with youth, foundational work with disadvantaged kids, things like that. But people are crazy passionate about that here. So they're not trying to live up to a value. They are that value. You just do it. We've got win-win. That's an ethic, which is just be fair. You know, we build coming back to the quality and the managed growth of a business. If you're chasing the coin, if we're going Jerry Maguire route.
Watched that last night.
Did you?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
We do it every night.
Show me the money.
Every night. That's completely contradictory to what we're...
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'm not going to edit that. I'm not staying.
But the win-win is looking for fair outcome. All right. So even if things don't go exactly the way you want, what's fair? Not always focusing on the monetary gain. Our motivators aren't there. So that happens. Passion is something that we have an abundance of, but not like bringing a puppy dog into the office that's passionately running around the place, humping everybody's legs. They do. Yeah. It's a controlled, it's a focused passion that means that people genuinely enjoy what they do. If you go out and talk to anyone here, you get the same feeling. There's no judgment. There's no friction. Everyone's doing their thing. Everyone's extraordinarily capable, but they're passionate about the bit that they do. The point of joining up those objectives and sharing that across every member of staff and every team and every manager, we do that. We took them into the wilderness, didn't we, with Bear Grylls last time and did a whole cool team building activity. But it's all about me being courteous to you. I'm passionate about my bit, but not to the detriment of what you're trying to achieve in your area of the business. Everyone knows, everyone's intrinsically linked. Their success is based on each other just being passionate and amazing at what they do. That's what works for us. So those values, they are written up on a wall, but we need those reflected in character traits. Then it's your core value, not something we adhere to as a company.
And I think it is intrinsic, and it's intrinsic to the brand Xledger. You have to have people have to believe in those values. And taking a step back 2 years ago, one of the things that Xledger didn't actually have is an identity. People came to work and it was just coming to work. There was what was Xledger to them? It was just a job, and you've got to make that much bigger. That's why we did, why we created an identity through working with Bristol Sport. There are various elements to that. There's a commercial branding exercise, but there's also the community side of it, which is very important to us and very important to a lot of them. There's getting involved with the Bears women, which are, we're 54%, is it now? 54%?
54, we are outnumbered. Yes, 54% women. Yeah.
54% women, which is really unusual in our industry. It's about 13% normally. So it's about having those values underpin the identity of the business, and they need to be proud of that. They need to be proud when they say Xledger, I really am proud to work at that business because it delivers on all those aspects, not just the outwardly bringing in a new customer, but the actual intrinsic part of the business.
And an additional layer to that is how you look after your staff. You got Peloton.
We don't actually. They thrive on neglect, we find.
That's it. Pelotons, yeah.
So obviously, pandemic, stress, pressure. What are some of the things you do to ensure your staff are looked after? And I think it'd be interesting to hear what other people should copy from you.
Empower them through enablement. We sent alcohol all the time at home, didn't we? That was no, what we had to adapt very quickly, as did everyone else. And we wanted to do our own version of events and retain an element of control. So when that first lockdown happened back in March, wasn't it, 2020, we'd actually sent everyone home a week before, just to say, have you got the setup at home? Have you got the kit you need? Let's send screens and laptops and make sure that you're comfortably set up and prepared. And if you're not, you've still got a week before those things aren't options. We also did an audit of everyone's work at home conditions. Everyone's pandemic was different. Everyone's lockdown was different. I remember thinking this is brilliant as I sat in my garden with a bit of sun, watching the puppy run round and all that sort of thing. Some people, a puppy grew up. Everyone had a different version. I think you've got to recognise that. Switched on a very keen focus on mental well-being. and aligned our HR to looking at how do we maintain the things that we think we're going to lose. So those human interactions we're going to lose. Fear factor, that safety is suddenly lost, the unknowing. Once we've got through this fun part of it's new, none of which was particularly fun, but it was novel. What are we going to do to keep people engaged? And true to style, we put a huge effort in, and it's amazing. You know, the output is somebody receives a home marshmallow champagne flavored toasting kit. The effort that's got into trying to be creative about what do we do and how do we formulate interaction from that to keep people connected, to keep people sane, to have the opportunity to see that everyone's fit and well without being formal about it. We did wine tastings. We had this brilliant lady who was a sommelier. She chose us some wine. We sent that to everybody's home. We had about 50 people, didn't we? All logged on, gradually getting merrily pissed on there. And that worked, but it stuck with our cultural compass, didn't we? So people look at you as the leaders of a business to have all the answers. And although we don't normally, we definitely didn't in that period because we were in the unknown. There's no precedent. There's no data that tells us what to do or how to deal with this. So we kind of just stuck with our version of things. What feels right? What would you want to have happen to you? Genuinely having an empathy for everybody's individual circumstance and focusing on it, and then making sure that we kept a level of engagement. The effort was huge, but massively worth it, wasn't it? We actually recruited 25. We doubled the size of the head count in the first year of pandemic. We doubled the size of it again, and everyone still it fits within what we wanted.
It was a tough time. There's a lot of learning from that. And we now take a lot of what we did then and continue to do that. You create FOMO by doing that, and people want to be back in the office. So we're consistently doing that, but we're doing it here now. Or as Mark said,
that's what I wanted to come on to, because obviously, people are really struggling to keep a cohesive culture when some people are at home and some people aren't, and they're trying to figure out how that works for them. So what do you do now that's all settled down a bit to keep your culture together?
Yeah, well, first of all, we put the fence at the top, didn't we? We hired people that had a desire to interact with other human beings. That didn't go away. That did change. We all got a bit lazier, didn't we, in terms of do I want to bother to travel to London? God, no. Not through laziness, actually. That's unfair to say. More just through inconvenience, and productivity is way better. But we looked at we changed the design of the office partway through. We were fortuitous enough to be building that from scratch. So we tweaked. We thought about what are we going to need when people come back from this pandemic, and it was a hub, wasn't it? Yeah. And we came up with this, or Ian came up with this concept that was you've got to collaborate. The problem solving and the momentum were the things that were lost. Yeah. The inconvenience of having to schedule a FaceTime call or whatever it might be, to those coffee conversations that everything happens instantly. We've packed the office full of booze, pub, a couple of bars, shuffleboard tables, table tennis, all of that. Loads of cool areas to interact. We offset our carbon footprint by putting 250 real plants in. We created an environment where everyone wants to be. What that enabled us to do, and why did we do it, is everyone's following a regime that's conforming to what the company's design is. We didn't want to do that. We wanted people to choose to come back. To this day, we've never had to tell anyone we're doing a hybrid, we're doing a 3 and 2, we're doing a 1 and 4, whatever it might be. On the day that we came back just recently, with the Monday where we could all, 100% of everyone came in. We have about 90% of people in all the time now. Productivity, however, in some areas was massively improved. So most of them do a day a week at home, but you see that productivity, you see the benefit of it. They don't do Mondays and Fridays. There's none of those patterns that as a business leader, you might question the sort of motivation behind it.
You've sort of ended up organically where I think a lot of businesses will settle over the next couple of years anyway. And obviously there's been thought put into that at the beginning, but you haven't really forced it. You've just allowed people to create their own.
That was the design. Yeah. What can we do so that we don't have to force it, because you can't appease
themselves. They are driving that culture now. We can step back and enjoy it. They I look at Ellie. She's always doing something to bring the people into some social of some sort.
Those cakes were made by one of our fair few out there that can cook well.
Yeah, and they do, and it is organic. And as I say, you then end up in this position where it's FOMO. I want to be in the hub or the office. It is a hub, really. It's a place to come and work, but also to socialise and engage. And people are great friends as well. They're people that socialise outside of work. There's a lot of people that joined, as we said, in COVID that had no idea. There are people that met each other for the first time, at the end of last year. So it's fascinating to watch. It's great, actually.
Do you think what employees need has changed over COVID, or stuff's just got more focused, or is it still roughly the same basic human things they needed before?
Yeah, it's the same. The working behaviours have changed because you get used to a different working pattern, don't you? And, there's been a boom in dog ownership, so there's the COVID pets or whatever you want to call it. Because people, that was the reason to get out, wasn't it? We were quite stifled in our ability to go and exercise and get outside. So there was a lot of people now able to do that, whereas working lives didn't facilitate pets and that sort of thing. What you got to do is embrace that as a work-life balance. So they bring the dogs in here. I mean, it's bedlam sometimes, especially with your 17-stone behemoth of a bear. And a couple of dogs have peed on a few people, which is always a bit awkward. But you provide the same working environment. So where's the advantage to staying at home? Within the design of the office here, we've got big open spaces. It's open plan, but we have built booths aptly named after the diviest nightclubs of Bristol. So even through COVID, we were still in the Thekla, weren't we? But you provide the facility and the equipment and the ease of which you can do it. We paid for everyone's parking. We took a subscription out of the NCP over the road so that they could conveniently travel in without using public transport, which was part of not wanting to spread COVID. We actually, through COVID, had our own licensed COVID testing centre, our training room. We turned into that so everyone could get tested here. As we've moved back out of that, it's not back to business as usual, but it feels like we're keeping and maintaining the good bits of what we were forced to learn through COVID, but we're back to it's a lot easier to have fun. It's a lot easier to problem solve and meeting and seeing people that you actually enjoy being around. One of the common things they all talk about is everyone's capability is so high and their ability to impart knowledge. We've had to do this because there aren't many people that have been here even a year. Yeah. We doubled twice, and that's a lot of new people. If you're trying to learn a complex product in finance management, you need proximity to the person who knows what they're doing. So they feel that obligation. I know what our mission is. I'm on that. I need to do my part. I need to be up to speed this month. So I'm going to go and sit next to Mike because he's going to enable me and help me do that. I can't do that from home as well. Equally, it's about being mature and treating them as grown-ups. You understand the mission. You know what your part of that objective is. How you go about achieving that, we trust you. You figure that out, and whatever works for you. If it affects other people and their ability to do it, your work, then we might intervene. But ultimately, they all know what they're doing. Just crack on. We're going that way, boys. Let's get on with it.
Yeah. We're running out of time, but that was a really fun, interesting chat. Thank you, chaps. I'd like to wrap up on two. One, apologise to anyone listening for the constant banging on the table, but Mark is very excitable with his hands.
What did I do?
Just constantly hitting the table.
Sorry.
But it's fine. We won't be able to edit that out either. So it was Ian's dog under the table. And maybe just to leave with, to any similar companies in a similar area listening that could steal or should steal one thing from how you've created your culture, what's the most important thing each for you that other companies should be doing?
I think personally for me, transparency coupled with honesty. I know that's two things, but we're really transparent here. Half the staff are qualified accountants, so they'll figure you out anyway. But being really transparent, this is what we're doing, why we're going to do it, and then sharing the results of that constantly with nothing to hide. We're not doing very well at this bit. And what you find is loads of people get on board that area of focus. We'll help. We reckon we can do something to help our colleague and our buddy. And it all comes from that transparency that starts, at the top, but ultimately they demand that of us now. What's going on? What are we doing next? Where's the product going? What customers are we winning? Why are we winning so many? And all those kinds of things. So that real honesty and transparency works for us. What would you say yours is?
I would say, going back to the cliche, but empowerment.
Oh, we hadn't had that one yet.
Yeah. No, empower your people. Let them take over and drive you, but you got to trust them. It's trust, isn't it? We've talked about that. So empowerment and trust. Yeah.
I don't know if that tells anyone anything. Empower the people is.
Well, let them.
How do you do that? How, mate?
We're gonna have a slow fade out while you two figure it out.
As we bicker in the background.
Exactly what I mean.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, please give us a good rating on your platform of choice and be sure to subscribe to future episodes. And while you're doing that, why not follow Interaction on all the usual socials? Thanks, and see you on the next episode.